I'm going to show you another way of playing the Stonewall attack. So the typical setup in the Stonewall attack is where we start with pawn to d4 and we expect black to play d5, or they can start with knight to f6 then play d5 later on. Cause the structure that we want to have is something like this, where we control the BH diagonal very early with our light squared bishop. If we delay playing bishop d3, black might just play bishop f5 and start controlling this diagonal. So that's why we play bishop d3 very early. And in case of c5, we play c3, so that if c4, we play bishop c2. Yep, you already know all these stuffs. Let's say knight c6, intending to go e5. We go f4, making sure that we are controlling the center, especially on e5. And this is the structure that we want to get in the opening stage, which is simply known as the Stonewall structure. Then we start our middle game plan with knight to e5. We always want to plant the knight here. Then whenever you get stuck with what to do, just go queen f3. This move is very important, simply making sure that the e4 square is well guarded before we start playing other moves. And only after queen f3, that's when we start our kingside pawn expansion, beginning with g4, g5, paving way for our queen, and this is how a perfect Stonewall is expected to look like. The other knight will join the party. We can always develop the dark squared bishop to this side of the board after pawn to b3 if we want. Now here is the question: what if black plays other openings, or just something to avoid the Stonewall attack? Let's say the King's Indian defense. What should we do? I'm just responding to one of the comments that I read from one of my dearest subscribers, so let's look at that as well. Alright, let's begin. So what do I recommend against the kid, or the so-called King's Indian defense? So you start pawn to d4, and then black plays knight f6. Wait a second, this is not the King's Indian defense yet. The King's Indian defense looks like the perk where black plays pawn to g6 and d6 against pawn to d4 and c4 in most cases. So right here, just play pawn to e3. You might never know. So if pawn to d5 by black or pawn to e6 from here, then that's a clear indication that they might not play the King's Indian defense. So that's when we can go bishop d3. But if they play pawn to d6, for example, or pawn to g6, then that's a clear indication they are playing the King's Indian defense. And that's when I recommend you go bishop e2. So for example, if pawn to d6 by black, yes, you can go bishop e2, but I like this sneaky move, bishop c4, because on the previous move, black was planning to go e5, which they are going to do most of the times. e5, that's when you take the pawn. If they take the pawn, look at this move, bishop takes f7, check. And if they take, you now take the queen. Oh, that's not a free queen. Black can play bishop b4 check, indirectly attacking your queen on d8. So you just simply retreat your queen. If bishop takes, you take with a bishop. Now it is white who is a pawn up with a promising position. So clearly you shouldn't be afraid of this. Let's go back. So instead of pawn to d6, you might see black playing pawn to g6. Now you know this is the King's Indian defense. Well, in the King's Indian defense, we won't worry about playing knight bd2, which is one of the key moves that we play in the Stonewall attack. So just know this, pawn to g6, no knight bd2, since black hasn't committed to fight for this square with a move pawn to d5. So just forget about this move knight d2. Play bishop e2 in this position. Bishop d3 doesn't make sense because there's nothing you're attacking on f5 or along this diagonal. Bishop g7, you go pawn to f4, keeping everything in the spirit of the Stonewall. They may play d6. Now be careful with d6. Black may just play pawn to e5, maybe after something like knight bd7. So we'll just continue with knight to f3, just keeping an eye on the e5 square, not letting black to come here. So knight bd7 is played. You already know the idea. It might not be now, but after black castles short and then plays rook e8. Anyways, so right now is where you show how flexible you are in chess. You simply go pawn to c4. This is like a new idea which keeps the game equal. We don't normally play c4 in the normal Stonewall attack, but black's pawn is not on d5, so why not dominating with our pawns on the center? So pawn to e5, if pawn to e5, here is the first secret to keep. Don't do anything about this pawn. Don't do anything. Don't take with any of your pawns. In fact, we want black to take us, then we'll take back with our e-pawn, still maintaining our 3 pawns on the center. That will be well defended, by the way. So it doesn't matter what black does. You just remember this move. knight first before developing any other piece or before castling short. By the way, black hasn't yet castled short, so there's no need for us to rush. Let me give you an example. For example, if e takes d4, we'll simply take back with our pawn, and now you can see that we are still having 3 pawns that are well defended by our big pieces. And next we're going to castle short. So that's the first secret. Just maintain your 3 center pawns and you'll be good to go. So if black doesn't take on d4, let's say if they just play something like e takes f4, again you just take with that pawn, still maintaining your center pawns. If black castles short, that's when you castle short. See how we are controlling the e5 square? If c5, we just advance our d pawn to d5. Rook e8, we go bishop d3. Maybe our middle game plan will be to push this pawn to f5. Pawn to a6. Whenever you see pawn to a6, just know black wants to play b5. So you lock up the queen side with a4. Knight g4 by black, paving way for the dark squared bishop. Well, here you just go rook e1. See how simple this is to play. Knight f d6, paving way for the light squared bishop. h3, you don't want to keep your enemy's pieces in your territory. Let them go because you have g4. They told you not to push your pawns in front of your castled king, but that's when you were a beginner. There are many pieces in this case that may protect the king. If h takes g4, a sacrifice, black thinks after taking, he will still be able to pin our knight to the queen and cause some problems for us. But we have this intermediate move. Rook takes e8, check. And after queen takes, we now take the knight. After bishop takes, we move our queen away from the pin and we are just up a piece. So this shouldn't be a worry for you. You can see how we were playing with our pawns. This is something that you have never seen on YouTube before. Let's move forward. So after pawn to e5, and then we play knight c3 controlling the d5 square. You might not see black taking any of our pawns. They may play something like pawn to e4. Well, against this, you just go knight g5, attacking this pawn twice. If queen e7 by black, guarding this pawn, we simply go queen c2. And there's nothing that black can do to save his pawn. They make castle short and then we take the pawn. They take our knight and now we take with the queen. We have a good position, so it's okay for us to exchange queens and go into the end game. If queen h4 check, we go g3. They'll go back and then we play queen c2. Next, we are going to castle short. I mean, this is how you play the Stonewall attack if black chooses to avoid it. By the way, we still have our Stonewall structure, except that our c-pawn is on c4, well advanced, and you should have no problems from here. Alright, again, one more time, d4, knight f6, e3, then black plays pawn to g6. You go bishop e2, then bishop g7, f4, keeping everything in the spirit of the Stonewall, pawn to d6, knight f3, knight bd7 by black. Once again, we don't even think of playing knight bd2 like what we do in the normal Stonewall attack. Instead, we go pawn to c4. So pawn to c4 right here. Now, instead of pawn to e5 immediately, black may play normally with the move castle short. After this, I just recommend that you just develop your other knight to c3. First, complete your development with these pieces before castling short. If rook e8 or one more other move, that's when you castle short. e5 may still come. What did I say? Don't even think of doing anything to this. Let them come to e4. It doesn't matter. You have this Stonewall structure on your center. Another move that you don't want to play here is the immediate bishop d2 because that will block the vision of your queen. So just don't think about these moves. You can play other moves such as rook b1, knowing that black's bishop on g7 is indirectly eyeing your rook on a1. That's how we play chess. So you can play rook b1 if you want. a3 is another move. Maybe even h3. King h2 will most likely develop this bishop on b2 or a3. But anyways, the move that I recommend here is just a waiting move. King h1. We want to see what black wants to do with this pawn which he pushed on the previous move. So this time they may play e takes d4. What did I say? You take back with your pawn. Again, you are still controlling this e5 square. It's all about the squares, not the pawns. Knight b6, the most played move. Here you just play bishop d3 because you have other ideas of pushing your f-pawn to f4 and destroy black's kingside. If bishop g4 pinning your knight, just go pawn to h3. This is very easy to play. you go pawn to a4. I mean, there are plenty of good moves to play here. Queen c2, ensuring that your knight is defended. You play pawn to b4 next. You play a5. I don't know. There's just plenty of things to do. You develop your dark squared bishop. Make sure that your rooks are connected. You start fighting for the e file. One of your rooks should sit on this open file. And the game from here will be simple. You're just playing chess. So this is how exactly you can play against a kid. I hope you're going to try this out. Let's look at other things as well. Another challenge that you may face when playing the Stonewall is as follows. So you go pawn to d4, they play d5, and then you play pawn to e3, your move. Then they go knight f6, everything is going well. You go bishop d3, and then instead of pawn to c5 or other normal moves like pawn to e6, black plays knight c6. So whenever you see knight to c6, just know that black wants to get rid of your Stonewall bishop as soon as possible. Not to mention that this knight to c6 move also prepares pawn to e5. So I said, whenever you see knight c6 or knight bd7, go pawn to f4 to avoid e5. And because of this sequence of moves, black now plays knight b4, trying to get rid of your Stonewall bishop. Well, here I advise you just ignore about that. Just continue with knight to f3. If they take your bishop, don't take with your queen. What grandmasters do here is taking with their c-pawn, because now this knight can no longer come on e4. Our pawn is saving the role of a bishop guarding this e4 square, so we are good to go. If bishop g4 or bishop f5, we can always play queen b3. Now that there is no defender of this pawn, pawn to e6 may be played. We castle short. c5, we don't do anything, we don't take. We let black to take us so that we can take back with our knight. Pawn to b3 we play. We want to develop our other pieces. This is still the opening stage. We need to develop pieces, not just playing with pawns. C takes d4, we take back with our knight. Bishop d6, probably black wants to play pawn to e5, but we just go bishop a3, trying to neutralize this dark squared bishop, but at the same time developing our minor piece which was doing nothing on c1. If the bishop runs away, we'll be stopping black from castling short, so they have to play something like castle short, and then we go queen d2. The ideas are well known. We'll take this bishop, we'll develop our knight to play rook f3, rook h3, and life will go on from there. Our knight on d4 is also very safe. So this is one way to play against the knight c6 line. Let's go back. So again, d4, d5, e3, knight f6, bishop d3. Instead of knight c6, you may see black playing pawn to b6 right away. With pawn to d6, the idea is that black just wants to challenge our Stonewall bishop once again with the move bishop s6. What do we do here? We still continue f4. If bishop s6, I suggest that you wait for c5 to come. That's when you play pawn to c3. Just continue knight bd2, controlling the e4 square. If bishop takes, again you take with your c-pawn, controlling the e4 square. Now black cannot play knight e4. c5, just wait for black to release his anger. Knight gf3, c takes d4, again you take back with a knight. Knight bd7 by black, preparing to push pawn to e5. You just go knight g2 f3. Stopping pawn to e5, e6 by black, you castle short, bishop d6. Again, how do you develop your dark squared bishop? You still need to develop pieces in the opening stage. You go pawn to b3, castle short by black, bishop b2, rook c8, queen e2. I mean, you still have a very decent game here. You have moves such as knight b5. Your bishop on b2 is indirectly eyeing the g7 square. And always remember that rooks smile on open files. You play moves such as h3, pawn to g4, you start attacking on the king side, king h1, you still have a game. Anyways, let's go back. So back to this position, instead of knight c6 or pawn to b6, black may also try to play knight bd7 right away. Knight bd7 again prepares for pawn to e5, so you go pawn to f4, and then they play pawn to c5, wanting to come to c4, you play pawn to c3, remember? Pawn to g6, playing in the style of the King's Indian, or should I say the Grunfeld. You go knight d2 anyway, stopping e4, bishop g7, knight gf3, castle short, pawn to b6, you already know the idea, bishop b7. You still continue with your Stonewall plans, knight e5, bishop b7, queen f3, rook c8, Now let me give you a hint for these types of positions. You can see that there is nothing that you are doing on the king side. There's nothing to attack. The position is dead solid. So if you notice that the king side is deadlocked, play from the queen side. So stop whatever you're doing on the king side. Just start pawn to b4, for example. If c takes b4, you take back with a pawn. Knight e8 by black, you go a4. You're just playing on the queen side. If knight takes e5, you take back with a pawn. f6, queen g4, f5, queen e2. I mean, just play chess at the end of the day. Not to mention that it's you who is having a good position, so you should be good to go even with this challenge. Anyway, so this is just about everything you guys needed to know about the Stonewall attack. I guess now you'll be good to go with this system. Not an opening, by the way, so go and give it a try and let me know how things are going to go. If at all you enjoyed watching this video, don't hesitate giving it a thumbs up. Leave your comments in the comment section down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that I can be encouraged to keep on making more wonderful content just for you guys. And the link for my website is in the description down below, where you can purchase all my courses at very affordable prices. So thank you.